The sun hammered against the Red Sea, turning the surface into a sheet of hammered silver. I was 19, a soldier on leave, and the world felt like it belonged to me. The heat was a weight on my shoulders, but it felt like fuel. I stood on the edge of the Eilat shore, watching the distant silhouette of Algae Island. It sat low on the horizon, a jagged speck of rock against the blue. I did not check the tide. I did not consider the depth. I simply walked into the water. The initial shock of the cold against my skin was a relief, a sharp contrast to the blistering heat of the sand. I pushed off, my body cutting through the water with rhythmic, powerful strokes. Every pull of my arms felt effortless. I was fast. I was strong. I was untouchable. Behind me, the shoreline began to shrink, turning into a thin, fragile line of beige. I kept my eyes locked on the island, counting the strokes, feeling the pulse of the sea beneath me. The water was clear, deep, and silent. I was halfway there, moving with absolute certainty. The rhythm broke first, a subtle pull against my chest, a drag that had not been there a moment ago. I tried to compensate, digging my palms deeper, but the water felt heavier now, thick and unyielding. Then, it happened. A sharp, sudden pinch flared in my right calf, like a needle driven deep into the muscle. My leg locked into a rigid, involuntary cramp. The pain was a white-hot spike that traveled instantly up my spine, paralyzing my movement. I thrashed, trying to kick, but the muscle refused to obey. The sea took advantage of my immobility. It pulled me down, the weight of the water pressing against my chest. I opened my mouth to shout, but only brine rushed in. The salt burned my throat, a stinging, suffocating heat. My lungs screamed for air, but every breath was just another mouthful of the sea. I reached for the surface, fingers clawing at the emptiness, but the light above was already fading. The brilliant blue dimmed into a murky, distant gray. The thrashing stopped. It did not end because I found a way to fight, but because there was nothing left to give. My arms, which had been cutting through the water with such arrogance just moments before, now hung dead at my sides. The panic that had been a roaring fire in my chest began to cool, replaced by a strange, heavy lethargy. I stopped fighting the brine. I stopped clawing at the surface. My lungs, once burning for air, now felt hollow, as if the sea had finally claimed the space where my breath used to be. The transition was absolute. The violent, desperate urge to survive simply evaporated, leaving behind a cold, quiet surrender. I felt my body go limp, a discarded weight in the vast, indifferent blue. I began to sink. There was no more light to chase, no more shore to reach. The murky gray of the surface drifted further away, becoming a memory of a world I no longer occupied. I descended into the abyss, turning slowly in the dark, silent water. Every muscle relaxed, every nerve went quiet. I was no longer a soldier on leave or a man in a race. I was just a drifting object, sinking deeper into the crushing, velvet silence. The pressure vanished. The heavy, velvet silence of the deep sea floor simply ceased to exist. I did not move, yet I was no longer sinking. I felt a sudden, sharp expansion, as if the walls of my own skin had dissolved into the surrounding air. I was weightless. I was not breathing. Yet I was more awake than I had ever been in my life. I looked down. The water below was no longer a threat. It was a transparent window. Through the murky depths, I saw a shape drifting in the dark. It was my own body, limbs splayed and motionless, caught in the slow, rhythmic pull of the current. I watched it with a strange, clinical curiosity. There was no terror, no desperate urge to return to that cold, limp shell. I felt entirely detached, a thin, clear presence, hovering in the space between the surface and the sky. I was free, and for the first time, I felt no fear at all. The sky above the water did not just brighten, it ignited. A brilliant, blinding white light descended, not as a sun, but as a tractor beam of pure intensity. It caught me. I felt the pull, a gentle but absolute force drawing me upward, away from the sea and the body I had left behind. As I ascended, the atmosphere around me dissolved into a screen. The sky became a canvas. My life began to play. It was not a slow recollection, but a rapid, silent film projected against the horizon. I saw the house where I grew up, the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun of my childhood kitchen. I saw the first time I learned to run, the scrape on my knee, the smell of dry grass. Then, the frames accelerated. I watched the boy become the man, all in a sequence that defied time. There was no sound, only the visual roar of a life lived. The rapid film of my life stopped. The light did not fade, but the images shifted, hardening into a singular, agonizing reality. I was no longer looking at my past. I was looking at the immediate future. I saw a procession moving slowly across a dry, sun-baked landscape. My parents were there, their heads bowed, their shoulders slumped under a weight I could feel from the sky. My brothers walked beside them, their eyes fixed on the ground. They were moving toward a freshly dug pit in the earth. I saw the casket, a heavy wooden box, moving with them. It was draped in a cloth marked with a gold Star of David. The air around them seemed to ripple with the intensity of their sorrow. I watched their faces, etched with a grief so profound it tore at the atmosphere. I saw my mother reach out to touch the wood, her hand trembling. I saw my father, his jaw locked, his eyes hollow. The detachment that had kept me hovering in the light began to fracture. I tried to pull away, to return to the silence, but the scene held me. Then, a sharp, physical pinch struck my heart. The weightless piece shattered instantly. I was no longer an observer of the wind. I was a son, a brother, and I was dying. The vision of the grave vanished. The sky, the light, and the detachment were ripped away. I was falling. Gravity returned with a brutal, crushing force, dragging me down through the dark expanse. I plummeted, the air whistling past me, until I slammed into my own body with the force of a collision. The transition was instantaneous and agonizing. One moment I was hovering, the next I was submerged in the freezing, suffocating depths of the sea. Cold water rushed into my lungs, burning like liquid fire. I choked, my chest heaving against the pressure of the current. My limbs, which had been limp seconds ago, now thrashed with a desperate, frantic energy. I kicked, fighting the drag of the water, clawing at the murky grayness. My lungs screamed for oxygen. I reached upward, my fingers breaking the surface. As I pushed against the weight of the sea, I breached the air, gasping, coughing, and vomiting brine. My vision blurred, but I felt a hand clamp onto my arm. He dragged me through the surf, inch by inch, until my knees scraped the sand. I collapsed, shivering, the sound of the waves roaring in my ears. I lay on the wet sand, my chest heaving with every ragged breath. The grit pressed into my skin, a sharp reminder of the solid earth I had nearly lost forever. I stared up at the sky, watching the clouds drift in silence. The roar of the sea faded into a dull hum. My pulse slowed, matching the rhythm of the waves. In that stillness, the panic of the drowning vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I looked at my hands, watching the water drip from my fingers. I had been dead. My body had failed, my lungs had filled, and yet I was here. This was not a miracle of luck. It was a command. I felt the connection between my intent and the sudden, impossible strength that had surged through my limbs when I needed it most. My mind had overridden the physical failure of my body. It had forced the cells to function, to fight, to pull me back from the void. I realized then that the mind is not a passenger in this vessel. It is the driver. It holds the power to direct the body, to signal the cells, and to dictate the boundaries of survival. If my consciousness could reach across that threshold to restart a dying heart, it could command the body to purge any illness. We are not merely flesh and bone. We are the architects of our own biology, capable of steering our physical reality through the sheer application of will. I stood up, the sand shifting beneath my feet as the tide pulled away from the shore. The cold air hit my skin, but I felt a steady, internal heat. I was not just a collection of cells. I was energy intelligence, a force capable of shaping my own biology. The surgeon and the hypnotist had taught me to visualize the destruction of illness, to direct my white cells like an army. But this was more. It was the realization that we are defined by the purity of our intent. When that energy is perturbed by rage or external toxins, the vessel suffers. But when we maintain a positive charge, we remain in control. I survived that day in Eilat because I was pulled back by the weight of human connection. That bond was the tether that anchored my consciousness when it had already drifted into the abyss. I realized then that faith is not a passive belief held in the mind. It is the active, conscious application of our energy to the physical world. It is a tool, as tangible as a blade or a compass, used to navigate the currents of existence. We are the drivers of our own reality. We are the architects of our own survival. If we learn how to steer, if we learn how to focus that internal force, we are capable of miracles. I looked out at the water, no longer a victim of the current, but a master of the energy that moved through me. I was the driver, and I was finally alive.